and welcome to the Naked Truth About Gardening. Many people have asked me, why naked? Naked is the perfect word to describe the relationship between nature and humans. The basic premise of our show is that interaction with nature is essential to human health. Scientists cannot explain it, but clinical studies have proven that people who garden and interact with nature live longer, stronger, healthier lives than those who don't. Just viewing nature for 15 seconds 10 times a day can reduce mental fatigue, lower blood pressure, and place your mind in a recuperative state. Everywhere I go, people tell me, I don't garden. I can't grow anything. Every plant I touch dies. I believe anyone can grow plants once they know how. Even confessed plant killers can learn the simple skills needed to sustain plant life. Like fashion, every gardener has their own style. How you grow plants is as unique to you as the clothes you put on every morning. This show is different from other gardening programs. In fact, the plant growing techniques presented may challenge traditional gardening practices. We will explore this ancient art of growing while revealing tips, tricks, and techniques that utilize technology of the 21st century that defines the modern urban gardener of today. Trust me, I know. I was faced with an illness, complications of which caused memory loss. I was afraid I would forget how to garden. I decided to keep a notebook on how I gardened. Eventually, this journal became the unconventional series of books entitled The Naked Truth About Gardening. This show is based upon those books. I hope to reveal the secret health benefits of growing plants and teach you how to receive those benefits in just a few minutes every week. I know I didn't fully answer the question of why the word naked. Truthfully, we chose the word naked because this show has a reality element to it. It's not polished or perfect. It'll never tell you what's a good thing. It's more realistic, gnarly, buggy, and definitely muddy. So the crew and I would like to invite you on a journey of 1,000,000 miles. A journey that starts with one step. A journey that just might change your life. Typically, when you meet other gardeners, they ask, "Are you a dirt gardener?" Yes, I'm a dirt gardener. So let's go get dirty. Today we're going to talk about weeds. I know you've got them. You may not want to admit it, but you have weeds in your yard. We all do. When my yard gets taken over by the weeds, my husband calls me the weed queen. And I say, it's just gone to the birds and the wildlife, that's all. Those seeds on the grass, they're to feed the birds, honey. I'm using my noggin. But the truth about weeds is, they detract from the special plants that you have in your yard. They take up moisture and nutrients out of the soil. And if they're really thick, they're blocking your sunlight. So the key for weeds is to prevent them from growing. And the number one thing that I can tell you about your weeds is to never ever let them go to seed. This one little seed pod can make hundreds and hundreds of other plants. So the most important thing is to get them before they multiply. There are many ways to get rid of weeds. The first ones we're going to talk to are organic, and they involve pulling weeds. There are several tools that can help you pull those weeds out. A hoe is the number one way that we've pulled out our weeds for thousands and thousands of years. And it comes in all different shapes and sizes, all different kinds of tool handles. And it works well, but it's a lot of work. Then there's the three-pronged grabber thingy. And this is good because it really doesn't disturb the soil around your favorite plants as much. It just kind of grabs into the gnarliness of the weed and pulls just the weed out. So that's an interesting way. But again, You're killing yourself, pulling inch by inch every weed, bit by bit, until these nuisance plants have gone away. I once met a gardener who told me, a weed is a plant not in its proper place. Now, my neighbor pulls every little tiny seedling out of every crack and crevice of their house because they have a lot of their flowers grow back year to year from self-sowing. So he doesn't use any of these tools when he's in his garden. I'm more of a killer. I like to use this modern invention. It's kind of barbaric looking, isn't it? It's called a garden weasel. And basically, you roll it, and there's handheld ones, I couldn't find mine, and you roll it through the soil, and what happens is the weeds get tangled up in these bars and spurs and get pulled out by the roots. And it's not bad. I like it because it gets rid of those jiggly arms. But I have to say, my favorite weeding tool of all is the winged weeder. Now these again come in all sizes. You can get handheld, big wings, little wings, wide wings. And I use mine all the time. You wouldn't know it by the look of it. But basically, it has a blade across the front and a blade across the back. And as you glide it just 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch under the soil, it doesn't sever the green part of the plant. It's severing the roots, killing it as it lies there. And it's easy and it glides, the flat design. It really is a great adaptation and a modern use of an ancient tool. So the first and foremost way to get rid of weeds is to pull them out. My husband used to help me in the yard, and he would spend the entire spring helping me pull all of the weeds. The problem is, when the growing season got growing, so did the weeds. So we came up with several different ways to prevent weeds after you've hand pulled them out from germinating. So once you've eradicated your weeds from your garden using your hoe or your winged weeder or your garden weasel, you want to prevent them from coming back. So there are several ways that we can apply mulch, both organic and synthetic, to prevent those weeds coming back. Let's start with the organic ways. I like to use newspaper. Make sure that you use the white pages, not the shiny pages. Nowadays, most color from the newspaper is vegetable ink dye, so you don't have to worry about that contaminating your plants. But this is a great base for any kind of mulch that you're going to put on top of it. Make sure it's a couple layers thick, and the worms love it. My husband always says to me, oh, you have to go get the black mulch plastic before you put down any mulch. My problem with that is that it's not biodegradable, and it does suppress the weeds underneath from growing, but dirt and debris collect on top, and now you have a mat of weeds growing on top of this plastic. So you have to start all over again, ripping everything out. Where here, you can just layer upon layer upon layer. You can put down your paper, sprinkle your mulch on top. I love triple grind. Make sure that there's no paper peeking through, and this will suppress your weeds for 2 to 3 months. This is a great organic way to prevent your weeds from coming back and save all of your hard work. But if you want to go organic, mulch is the way to go. So over here, I have a distinct difference between different grades of mulch. The most important thing with mulch is that you do it thick enough so that light can't reach the soil. Without sunlight reaching the soil, you will deprive the seeds of not only light, but also of the warmth they need to germinate. This is double ground bark mulch, and you can see each individual bit of bark that has been chopped up by a grinder. And the good thing about this is that it's lightweight, and you can get it in all different kinds of bark. You could get it in cedar if you're worried about carpenter ants or other pests near the house, or you can get it in pine bark. And this will take a long time to break down. I don't suggest you use this in potted plants because as this decomposes, it will rob your plants of nitrogen. This area here is triple ground mulch. And you can see the bits and pieces are much finer. I love this mulch. It's almost to compost. And as the rain washes through it, it leaves a fine layer of decomposed, grinding up material, which will improve your soil texture and moisture retention. And all you have to do is add a little bit every year. Of course, triple grind mulch is a little more expensive than the double grind, but well worth it in my opinion. Another way to mulch is with stone. Typically, people do this on the coast around here, and it prevents weeds from growing up. It also keeps the soil very warm. Now, this is a great way to mulch your potted plants because not only does it keep the soil evenly warm, but when you water, nothing splashes up, making a big mess. Now, this at your local craft store or gardening store is about $4 or $5. But I have a great tip for you. You can go to your local pet supply store and buy a 10-pound bag of aquarium gravel. Looks pretty much the same, but it's at a fraction of the cost. Good old chemical America has a better way through chemistry, and this is a pre-emergent weed granular. And basically what you do, it is a chemical, it's not organic. And I'm just going to put it right here on this camera 3 so you can see it. It's granules that you're going to sprinkle over the ground. And when they're wet, they release a chemical onto the ground that will prevent most weed seeds from germinating. I'm not going to tell you the brand name. Now, of course, there are synthetic plastics that work well as mulch. Now, there is a clear plastic. Now, I suggest if you have a pot with weeds in it, you can use this shower cap over the top of the pot and prevent those weeds from growing. It makes kind of a greenhouse effect. It germinates whatever seeds were remaining in the soil and then kills them when the temperatures reach close to 120 degrees. And it's a great way to recycle your old cap here. But this has 100% light transmission through to the soil. You can use a black. These are selective reflective mulches. And there's been a lot of research at land-grant colleges to using thin colored plastic mulches. Now I have these in just little pieces, but you can use them, you can buy them by the roll. And I think the silver is good for the cucurbit families, like cucumbers and pumpkins and gourds, and that will accelerate their growth, reduce the amount of weeds, and give you a better yield on those kinds of plants. Black mulch is excellent in the spring because it absorbs heat and it will warm your soil up from frozen to a workable 50, 60 degrees. But black mulch in the summer will prevent sunlight transmission and will keep it cool. So your soil, unlike the clear plastic where your soil will go up to 120 degrees, the black plastic will keep it right around 50, 60 degrees. So this is a great mulch if you have cool weather crops like broccoli and lettuce because it will keep the soil cool. You know, there is a traditional planting technique where you plant ears of corn and then you plant your squash plants or bean plants in between your rows of corn. And many people say to me, oh, that's because your plants are going to grow up the corn stalks and it supplies support for them. And it's not exactly the case. The case is corn likes lots of sun, but it likes cool feet. and the squash plants shade, the huge leaves of the squash plant will shade the ground and keep the corn happy. And in the case of the beans, they have nitrogen fixing molecules on the roots, so it will put fertilizer into the ground, which is great for the corn because corn is a very heavy feeder. Now I also want to talk about, oopsie, I want to talk about, if someone could just hand me that red stuff. Thank you, Broccoli Rod. Okay, we're going to talk about red selective reflective mulch. I personally have used this mulch in a row by my tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. And I have to say, this is fantastic. I saw almost a 3-week increase in production. So I wasn't expecting my tomatoes to come in until July 14th, and they were in the last week of June. And the amount of productivity was unbelievable. I had at least double the amount of tomatoes, and they were sweet and juicy with this red selective mulch. So we want to thank all those land-grant colleges for the research that they do, because this is a modern technology that can help you succeed in your vegetable garden. Well, you know, there's one weed I'd really like to talk about. It's an evil, horrible, awful weed that needs to be eradicated from this planet of the earth. And that weed is poison oak, ivy, and sumac. The very first thing that you want to do when you're dealing with this weed and eradicating it from your garden is to put on a long-sleeved shirt. This will protect your arms from contact with the oils in either the leaves, stems, branches, or roots, because you can have an allergic reaction to any of the oil from any part of the plant. The other tip about when handling, there we go, I got my floppy arms, is I don't use cotton gloves when I'm touching this particular weed. Now, I am allergic. It won't kill me. I don't need an EpiPen, but I get a nasty, ugly, oozy rash that lasts for 10 to 14 days. I don't use cotton gloves because cotton will tend to absorb the oils and then concentrate them on my skin and continually abrade and infect me with that nasty stuff. So what I do use are these rubber-coated gloves. These happen to be from Tomboy Tools, but you can use any rubber-coated gloves because the rubber will resist the oils seeping through to my skin and causing me to get a rash. Now, why do we want this poison ivy away from our flowers? It will steal nutrients and moisture from your plants. So now I'm going to touch it. You can see this is poison ivy. Yeah. It has 5 leaves and a woody stem, and it has these tendrils that it can grow up things, and when the stem is underground, it will make roots and shoot out in different places. Now, a lot of people think poison ivy is essential for wildlife. I know deer like to eat it, and some other foraging animals find it to be important in their daily life. I don't care about the animals. I don't want this in my yard. I don't want it anywhere near my children, my pets, or my family. So how do I eradicate it? The first thing I attempt, is I recycle my plastic shopping bag. If you only have a few pieces, this is a great way because you have to take the root out. I grab, do I have it? Yes, I have it. I grab the plant and I pull the bag over the plant so that I can dispose it. I do not compost this, and I throw it into the trash. Tie it tight and toss it. Okay? Now, some very special weeds get a chemical treatment. And this weed, I saved for the chemicals. I don't often promote a chemical, but this chemical works. And you can spray it and it will kill the foliage of the plant for that particular season. And if it's the foliage that you're worried about touching and causing a rash on your children or your animals, this is the way to go. Now you have to keep in mind this is a chemical, but when it touches the ground it becomes inert and it will not kill the roots of your plant. It will only kill the foliage. And if that's the main contact, if you're walking down a path or you're brushing against something, and that's, my husband complains because he's going to cut the lawn and there's a branch hanging in his path and he always gets it on his shoulder. So this will kill the foliage, but it will not kill the roots. So it's very important that once the foliage is killed, go back and really rip out as many of those roots as you possibly can. Now, as I mentioned, my husband gets it every year. I get it myself from all the pulling. And I have a bag of remedies, and even if you try your best, there is a chance you're going to contract this nasty, oozy, itchy, awful rash. Now, as you can see, there's no shortage of supply of things that are going to help it feel better once you have it. But there are several methods to treat this nasty rash. I don't know why that's in there, or that. The first is an exfoliating scrub, okay? Techno is a famous brand for poison ivy control and prevention. And what you're going to do is, as soon as you think you've been exposed or you were out pulling it, you will come inside and you will wash your hands, and it has micro beads in it that will abrade your skin and release the oils and dry it up and prevent any rash from getting too bad. And it is helpful. My brother swears by this. There's also a sublingual treatment. This is a homeopathic, let's see if we can get it over here. It is a homeopathic treatment, and it's the essence of the rustoxodern plant, which is the poison ivy, oak, and sumac plant. And you put it under your tongue, and it's supposed to subdue the itching and the swelling and speed the healing process. And I have had success with using, an internal, not as much success as steroids, but it does help. Now, if you have the rash and you've already tried the scrubbing, any of these products will help to dry it, ease the itching, and cure it up. If your rash spreads to another part of your body that you did not initially have contact with the plant, or if it lasts more than 10 days, please see your physician because you may need medical treatment. Never burn poison ivy because you can inhale it, and don't compost it because it will grow and infect your entire compost pile. So that's all we're going to talk about these nasty, nasty weeds. I'm going to throw them out right now. I'm so pleased to announce that we have a new segment, Questions from the Viewers. And I have a few questions here. We're going to see if we can give you some interesting solutions to your everyday problems. So Mike T writes us, how do I keep deer from my plants? Well, Mike, you're in luck. One of the best ways to keep deer from your plants, and this may sound a little bit crude, but is to pee all around your garden. Another way to keep deer away from your plants, Mike, is to grow plants that are resistant to deer. Now, these rudbeckia are great, and they are resistant to deer. But if a deer is hungry, it's going to eat anything it can find. So if all else fails, and you've tried different kinds of urine, I've also heard of people hanging bars of soap, but you can also spray your plants with something like this, repellent. It's an amalgam of different kinds of offensive chemicals. Some are organic, some are synthetic, that you can spray on your plants. You want to make sure that it has a wax base that's going to adhere and it's not going to wash off in the rain. But I find the best way to keep deer from your garden and from your plants is to be aware of their feeding cycles. And basically, deer have two migratory seasons, the fall and the spring. So if in the fall you start to see deer coming into your yard, if you can't prevent them or scare them or deter them, They're going to be there until the next spring. In the spring, they'll move to other areas. It's another good reason to keep poison ivy out of your garden, because they'll come in just to eat that poison ivy. And then in the spring, you want to I take more strong roots, like with the chemicals, to keep the deer out of the yard. I sprinkle granules, mothballs, because I just want to interrupt their spring feeding pattern so they're not around in the summer. So that's a great question, Mike T. Thanks so much. We are so pleased you could join us today. For more gardening information or to connect with gardeners of the globe, go to www.honestgardening.com. If you have specific questions about today's show, you can find me on Facebook or follow me on Twitter. All of us at Down and Dirty Enterprises hope you enjoyed watching the show as much as we enjoyed making it. We hope it's both entertaining and informative, but most of all, we hope you'll join us in the weeks to come. Until next time, stay healthy, stay strong, and happy gardening.
I can never forget the feelings that we had. It's the timeless things you said to me, keep me from being sad. I still see your faces shining upon me. You look so free. Is it something that I said to make you go? Just a simple song I had to let you know. But I know now that the past is swept away. It's always true.